I'm going to continue on where I left off, talking now about the structure of Greek theater, and then we're going to move into Roman theater. All right, then we need to look at how theater happened. As I said, it was a festival. These were functions of the civic government. Playwrights were funded and they wrote plays all year long to compete in these festivals for financial prizes. And eventually the mayor is the one who selected the winner. They were assigned a choragus, which was like a modern day producer, took care of budgeting and finding actors. There weren't any professional actors. This was all an amateur thing. The professionals were the playwrights. And then there was a whole structure to how these festivals happened. On the first day, the playwrights introduced the topics because we don't have printing press, we don't have flyers being made. So during the festivals, the playwrights are trying to gather the audience's attention to come back later in the week to see their performance. Okay, so we're going to look at the way Greek theaters looked, at least to start. So, Greek theaters were structured very smartly. They were entered right into a hillside. Um, they were, I believe, on the south side of a hill. This was like the chosen location for them because of where the sun would hit. They didn't want the sun in people's eyes either in the early part of the day or in the evening as the sun was setting. So they did peg it on the south side so that the sun would be traveling overhead um, from side to side. So that was the first important thing. I mean, we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about lighting. Lighting did determine where these places, these theaters would be placed. All right, so they would, as I said, a hillside. They would find a hillside because the hillside had a perfect structure to it. You're going to see why. So we started, remember we talked about those threshing circles back when we talked about the dithyramb. So they would put this circular playing space. Now, this is post dithyramb time period, but they still had that circular sort of structure. So I hope you can tell that I'm kind of looking at this side as a side cross section. Um, because this was a hill and potentially that hill would continue on, they would sometimes put a little retaining wall there so that we don't have um, the, the theater slipping off the edges. So there's the playing space. And as time goes by, um, well, before we hit that, we need to know that this hillside made perfect seating areas for your audience. Um, at first, it was just the hillside. People came and sat. Um, as time went on, they did start to section out, like put steps in this hillside, um, so that people could sit on kind of ledges. Um, First, that was just made with dirt. Then they went over that with wood. And as time went on, thanks to the Romans, they actually built over that with stone. Had they not done that to those seating areas, we would have nothing today to look at. And there are ruins, there are remains of theaters that have these stone steps. But they first just started out right on the hillside. To come over here, we do need to talk about structures. So this over here, they would put a building in the back. This is called the Scena building. As you can see, there's a close relation to scene. By the way, the theatron, the seeing space that we talked about before, is out there. The large orchestra, we think about orchestra being a bunch of flutes and violins and things like that. Um, but orchestra root is actually dance. So that makes a lot of sense. So we'd have this orchestra space. Um, and then later on, I've kind of crossed it out, but isodoi were possibilities. And these isodoi would be these pathways for entrances and exits this way. It'll make a little more sense on the next page when we look at an overhead view. When we talk about this periskena, that could be an additional little step there. Again, we start basic and then we add more on, more and more on as time goes by. So here's your overhead view, so you can see some of those structures that we were just looking at. We have our Skena building. We have our orchestra playing space, seating space. We have our teatron, the seeing space. And this is over here, that retaining wall, so that we don't slip off the side of the hill. And because these are still religious things at their heart, we have our temple. This is the theater, specifically the theater of Dionysus. And I've got, oh, and here we go. There's north. So you can see, here's north. So you can see that we are facing primarily south. So the sun is going to come from, sorry, east. Yeah, the sun rises in the east. East and then to west. So it's going overhead this way. It's never shining in anybody's eyes. Just some more structures. This is the theater at Epidaurus. It's actually the same theater in both of these, and you can see that we have some more things. The Skena building is getting more, oops, that did not go well. This Skena building is getting bigger and bigger all the time. Likewise, we are adding more and more audience seating. So we had our first round of seating here, and then we added on a whole nother layer as time goes by. Again, this is the Theater Epidaurus, and we have some real pictures. So this is the actual structure. If you were to go to Greece today, this is what you would see. And like we said, there's the original and that we added on. And you can see there are trees in the background here because this is still built up on a hill. Here's your circular orchestra. The Skena area is cut off, and unfortunately, my lovely face is over the Skena building in this picture. I'm sorry. What you gonna do? All right. Um, Now we're going to go into some other stage structures. They didn't go in for very detailed or specific set design, but what we have here are periactoi. Periactoi are these prism-like structures, and each side of the prism, there's three sides here, would have a different texture on it. And so these prisms could be rotated so that we can have a different texture on each side and have a little uh, hint at a scene change. The other option here was the pinakis. Pinakis. um, these are little kind of early day flats. Um, and they were these tapestries or painted panels that were put in the windows of the Skena building. The Skena building, I don't think I've mentioned this yet. The Skena building is where, set changes might happen from, in this very basic way, but actors would go in there for entrances and exits and whatnot. All right, moving onward, maybe. Now here we have some stage machinery. Some really interesting things. First, let's start with the echiclema. Echiclema. It's actually a really basic piece of machinery, but it had an important function. Literally, it's nothing more than a rolling cart. It's a cart with wheels on it. That's it. But it had a specific purpose, and it says a lot about Greek theater because its purpose was to roll onto the stage, usually dead bodies. Um, not obviously real dead bodies, but an important aspect of Greek theater was that violence did not happen on stage. It was just not what was done. It was not considered part of their aesthetic. So they did not have violence happen on stage. However, these plays were very violent. It's just that the violence happened off stage, and somebody came in to report what happened off stage. And sometimes they would push the bodies in on one of these carts or ekaklema. And there you go. You have somebody reclining or dead on that ekaklema over there. The other really interesting um, set piece would be the Deus ex machina. Now, you may have heard that term. Yeah, I think it is, I believe, a movie. But the Deus ex machina comes from Greek theater. It literally means God of the machine. So, what Deus ex machina was, literally speaking in Greek theater, was basically a pulley system to lower somebody, an actor, onto the stage to portray some god. Um, Here we have it with a little more detail, but just basic layout over in this upper picture. We can see we have this Deus ex machina, God of the machine. Now, that term Deus ex machina has become known for other things because of Greek theater. We have, um, when you hear a story, when you see a movie, um, and the ending seems unbelievable, the story has wound this really complex plot. You wonder how anybody's going to get out of it. It seems too fantastic, um, and too difficult to be solved. And the writer solves it by saying, "Oh, it was all a dream," or uh, "Here's this magic ending that is unearned, an unearned ending." And that kind of ending is what we call Deus ex machina, because that happened in Greek tragedy. Sometimes we'd have a character, a god, come and, metaphorically wave his magic wand and solve the problems that happened on stage during the course of the play. And that was the resolution for the play. So we use that term to kind of signify an unearned ending. Just some stage costuming. Much of this is not any different than what people would normally wear during those days. I do want to point out these kothornoi because these are some pretty awesome platform shoes. So they did use these sorts of things to elevate the actors, both physically and metaphorically. And here we have some masks. As I've hinted at all along the way, the masks were essential to Greek theater, so much so that the character was the mask rather than the actor. Um, so the mask was an essential part of the character. So here are some drawings of those masks, but here's a sculpture, and I really like this image because it shows us a little bit more about this mask. I do believe I mean, this one looks like Dionysus over here, so it's a very similar type mask. Yes, we know the good old tragedy and comedy masks. We have, we see, excuse my wonderful drawing here. Um, but So yes, they're symbolic of theater in general, and that comes from Greek tragedy. But this mask was an interesting invention. If I were to go back to let you look at those slides of the space, keep in mind um, there's no amplification. Um, Thousands upon thousands of people fit. Whew, how's your day going? Thousands upon thousands of people fit in those theater spaces. And it was difficult to hear and see everything. So these masks are exaggerated, obviously to help with the seeing, but they also helped acoustically. This mask, this really exaggerated mouthpiece, is literally just that. It is a mouthpiece. These masks were built in with a megaphone around the mouth to enable to acoustically enhance the voice to send it to further areas of that audience seating space. Um, so acoustically, those buildings were, or buildings, those structures were designed to catch the sound, but also we had the masks assisting. We do have also music. I've mentioned many times how important music was to Greek theater. Um, just one type of instrument. We have the aulos, which is the double reeded flute. So that's a common thing you see satyrs play and different uh, imagery of Greek mythology. All right, these are some links that are not going to work as you're looking at them there, but I have other links for you.